right, so I'm going to start off with a pageant, if you will, of different things but first, I'm going to talk about it first. So the Matuka is a fly from New Zealand, and they can't really trace it to a specific person. But I have a book, The History of Fly Fishing in 50 Flies. It's interesting. There's probably 300 and some flies mentioned in it, but the main topics are 50 different flies that spell out the history of fly fishing or whatever. But this is one of them. And in that book, they talked about that there was a period of time where rainbow trout were introduced into New Zealand. And around that time, the early fly fishing history in New Zealand, most of the anglers used English style trout flies. But there were some fish, and if you have the printout, the sheet that I sent out, a lot of the lakes had a little fish called the Keoro fish, and it was kind of a mottled colored fish. And to simulate that fish, they found that the feathers of a brown bittern, we have those in the United States, but I think it's a different subspecies or something, was a good representation of that mottled, that the feathers of that bird gave a good representation of that fish body. And the name in the Maori language was Matuku for that bird. And they used, it became such a popular fly that everybody was killing them for their feathers. And so the bird was, the use of the feathers was finally banned to keep them from becoming extinct. But it's a style of tying is the main thing to focus on. Is it's now that we're not using the feathers of the bittern anymore, it's a style of tying, and it in the mid 20th century it spread to Europe and the United States. It was in I think it was Fly Fisherman magazine in the 80s, and it just really caught on then. There's a lot of old fly books. In 1975, Swisher and Richards wrote about it in their book Fly Fishing Strategy. But for the actual, the fly is mainly made up of a pair of feathers, mostly hen feathers are the best, but any kind of feathers that have a little bit wider of a profile. You couldn't use much from a rooster hackle, but some of the bigger feathers you actually can in smaller sizes. This is a size 6, and I was able to use a pheasant church window feather to make the pattern. The body is chenille, and then the feathers actually held down to the shank of the hook with a gold rib. This is an oval tinsel. And the Matuka style is to actually strip the fibers from the lower portion of the feather so that the shank lays flat against the shank of the hook. And then it's normally, at least in today's patterns, today's renditions, it's done with a soft hackle collar. This is on a little bit larger hook. This is using it's Coq de Leon. I was able to get hen neck, Coq de Leon hen neck from, I think it was Hook and Hackle when they stopped with their fly tying materials. They had a big sale. Coq de Leon is pretty expensive, but I was able to get it at a pretty good price. And these hen feathers are modeled beautifully. And so I really like making them out of it. This could be a great baby bass. But it's just a nice mottled color. And if you really look closer, there's some iridescent color in some of those dark patches where it kind of has a greenish tint. But this is one of my favorite. And then this is a chenille that's called black coffee. It's a good thing to use for the what's that nymph with the legs? Anyway, this is my perch Matuka. It's an olive green grizzly. That's actually like a saddle hackle, but they are really wide tips. That almost looks like hen hackle. And then the body is olive chenille with orange in the front. And that just kind of gives a good profile of a perch. And so I really wanted to use these this year in those new lakes that have, they were only stocked with perch and smallmouth bass. So use some of these as a small perch. See if I can get my first smallmouth bass on a fly rod. This is, I tied these several years ago, spruce. There's a spruce fly that I kind of plan to do in a future, just as a streamer, a feather wing streamer. But this is a Matuka version of the spruce, where it has a red body, red floss body with peacock herl in the front half, and then a gold rib. But this is in the Matuka style, where it uses that gold rib to actually tie that feather down. And that's a beautiful fly. I already showed you the one using pheasant. And then this is one that I just kind of experimented with. It's using dubbing for a body. And that's actually a holographic tinsel, but you could use any tinsel for the rib. And this is just a hen neck, like a done hen neck. That's some examples of what you can do with them. So let me turn on the light here. Hang on a second. Try to get a little more light on the subject when I switch cameras. So for the body material, nowadays most Matukas are done with chenille body. That's the easiest by far. For the perch Matuka, I'll use this olive here and then an orange for the front part. For that one that I used, the Coq de Leon, that uses this variegated chenille. And that black coffee color, it's a Pat's rubber legs is what I was trying to think of, and it escaped my mind. That's a really good color of chenille to use for a Pat's rubber legs. But I used that for the body of that. It turned out really nice. For some of them, I like a spikier dubbing. If you'll remember that gray one that I showed you with the holographic tinsel, I used the They call it natural gray. Mixed it with a little bit of some different colors to make the body of that. But with a spikier dubbing, you can pick it out with like I put a little Velcro on my bodkin. I don't know where I found that, but it had glue on it, so I stuck it on the handle of my bodkin to kind of pick the dubbing out a little bit and make it more buggy. But you can use any dubbing brush or a bodkin to pick that out. That's another good thing to use for the body. For the wing, again, probably the most popular American Matuka flies are using these what they call church window pheasant feathers. You could use any feather that's wide. It just the only limitation is how long your hook shank is. So if I was to use this feather right here, I'd have to make sure that when I hang like about a hook length off the tail of the fly, I'd have enough to kind of make some the mohawk kind of look along the top of it there. So you could use some of these more colorful blue and green feathers, but a lot of those tend to really get into the marabou stuff toward the you've just got a little color here, and then it really gets into gray marabou, and it'd probably be fine. This is probably a good for a larger one, and I don't know how that tip would look on a Matuka, but you can use a lot of different pheasant feathers depending on the color you wanted to go for. If you want to represent like a little bullhead or whatever, this is the materials I used for the perch. It's I think it was sold as woolly bugger hackle, but these are actually, that looks real close to like a hen hackle, because they're really they're not they're webby. A lot of the fibers there are real webby. That really looks like hen. But if you look at some of these other examples of hen capes, here's a hairline hen cape. These are a little less expensive. Any of those feathers that you pick off of there, just pick a couple of them that are the same in size and pattern. If you're using a like say you're using pheasant, make sure the pattern is fairly close together. Something that has a nice long section of the colorful feathers. So this is a whiting hen cape. That's what I use for that gray hackle. I've got a few of these. These came real cheap. I think this was from Hook and Hackle as well. These India hen backs, those can be like $5 or $6, and they're real modeled like that. That would make some really nice Matuka style flies. But again, you're kind of looking for, when you get into the dry hackle, like this is a badger. It was sold as a cheap dry neck. You can get some pretty good dry feathers out of some of these smaller ones down here toward the base. But when you get out here, these are almost soft hackle type feathers here. So the once you kind of get the style in your head, you can come with all kinds of different combinations. This is that Coq de Leon neck, and there's just a whole lot of, it makes real good dry flies. This webby hen hackles here, but these up here toward the top, those are real good to pick out for Matuka style feathers. So that's about the show and tell there. Any questions before we get started?
Yeah, Mike, did you have you ever considered using partridge?
Partridge. I suppose you could. I don't have a whenever I bought partridge, it was in a pack where it's already stripped feathers. I
Yeah,
don't have like a skin where I could look for some longer feathers, but with the Matuka style, I mean, that's a size, that's a 4XL hook, and this is a 3XL. And I used a 3XL because that feather just didn't seem long enough to be able to cover that whole shank.
okay.
So if you were to use like even a 2XL or your regular nymph hook, or a smaller 3XL.
I may try that. I've got a partridge hide that I bought for Tenkara flies.
And that's the main reason I gave you so many different the show and tell period there.
Yeah.
Was to show you that you could pretty much use anything for it. I really like the spruce Matuka. So what I think I'm going to try to see if I can find is a like a hen, a badger hen neck, or just another, just a rooster, like a lower quality, like a grade 3 or grade 2 badger neck that has more defined feathers, where the middle of it is dark, the center of the feather is dark, and then when you wrap this hackle, some of them that I've seen, it's a real dark center with the lighter tips. There's also a Brahma, and I'm not familiar with what that is, but it's more of a white and black instead of a yellow and black. Similar to this badger, but it's just a real stark white and black. And I've seen some of them done in that as well. So for the first one, let's go with the kind of more of that. Of course, the one that I wanted to use, I destroyed the thread. So give me 1 second here. Pulled the thread out of the bobbin. When all else fails, just use a different bobbin. All right. So I'm going to start a couple eye links back, because on this fly, it's kind of easy to crowd the eye. So I'm going to start that off, and then since this is going to have a chenille body, I'm not too concerned with building any bulk. And then I'll use that variegated chenille. It's that black and coffee. Grab a section that's about a card length and a half. Oh, I'll use that later. For the rib, I'm going to use, in this case, I have a Danville's tinsel. It's an oval tinsel. This says size 14. I think that's about a medium. I've seen it sold as medium tinsel for this oval tinsel. Grab a section of that. I'll probably take a longer piece because I'll probably use that for the next fly as well. So I'm going to start this tinsel while I'm kind of wrapping that thread base. And I try to keep it on the far side. I do that for a lot of streamers because then when you start to wrap, it doesn't follow the tail. In this case, it just really works out nice for that first wrap around the feather. So the end of the shank is where, when the thread hangs, it goes pretty much to the gouge there. So I'll set that tinsel aside, out of the way. And then that piece of chenille that I cut off, I'm just gonna tease out some of those hairs, so you just end up with the core. Wrap that down, then you don't end up with a bump. And then I'll just advance it to the front and let it hang. So kind of an easy thing with this style of fly is you do the body and then you're done. And then, you know, all there is the wing. It's once you get the hang of splitting that feather into the mohawk shape, if you will, along the top of it. Once you get the hang of that, it's a really simple fly to do. Couple around the shank, and then I'll cut that out. Is that good view for everybody? Looks like it. All right. So there's the body. Sometimes when you wrap this, it ends up with just a black stripe and then a brown stripe on the side. You can see where it kind of has that effect. But sometimes it all mixes together. It depends on probably the shank diameter and where you started. So next is going to be the feather. So I selected these ahead of time, so I didn't have to show you plucking them out of the skin. So for this version, I have 2 of them that I plucked that kind of match in pattern. They were real close together on the hide. And you want to take these 2 feathers and rotate them. Do I need to zoom out? Maybe I will a little bit here.
Yeah, that's a little better.
Zoom out a little bit. Just to line these up. If you can see, if you slide them back and forth, you can kind of tell where the tips come together right there. And then just grab that. Now, should have grabbed it in my other hand. Line that up. So what you want is the tail to hang off about a hook shank in length. So about to there. So I'm marking that with my finger. And then I can just go up through here and just tear all those bottom ones off. Get them out of the way. So what I'm left with is that tail and then the bare shank like that. So that's going to come across the shank. And you see I start getting into some of this marabou stuff toward the front, but that's okay. And I'll just kind of split through there and just hold this down at the front. give it a few good wraps. I could always undo it if I have to, but that just holds it in place so it's not moving around. So now the hardest part really, if I take that tinsel and wrap it around, make sure it's not twisted. So right at the base, right at that tie down point, I kind of want to look at where that is going to want to cut through. And you can take your bodkin and just kind of open that space up and wrap it through. Make it kind of tight. And then just kind of fold everything back. Now you want to, it's kind of hard to get the hang of getting a space in there and deciding what spacing you're going to have your wraps go up toward the front. I don't know an easy way to describe the distance. You can just kind of make it up on your own. That just feels right to me for about a spacing on there. So then I'll just separate that and bring it through. Kind of stroke everything back. Bring it up, and for the next wrap, it's going to be right about in there. So I'll just run it through. Makes an interesting streamer pattern. It really does. And although the tail doesn't really move like marabou would, this mohawk, I keep calling it, really does give it a lot of movement in the water. Right through here. And we're just about up to the front. So I'll wrap this back and then tie off that tinsel. Make a few good turns so that doesn't get loose. Now snip that out. And we're done with these guys. Snip those out. Now, you can actually kind of almost marry those back together by just stroking like that, but that looks really good right there. So then while I was selecting those two feathers, I also picked one that had what I'm going to use as a soft hackle, feather, if you will. And if you kind of hold the stem against where you're going to tie it down, that kind of tells you about where those barbules are going to extend. I'm actually going to start with the tip section, but I've got enough really good modeled stuff here that I'm going to actually tie it in right about there. And tie that down pretty good. Clip the tip out. And then just try to pinch those feathers, fold them a little bit to get them started good. and stroke them back and then wrap. My feather twisted a little bit there, but I'll be able to compensate for that here in a second. And that's probably enough. Come up through there, a couple around the shank. And cut that out. Just take all of these and sweep them back. And build a little bit of a head there. This thread happens to be a GSP thread, and I hate it. So I'll be glad when it's gone. I don't mind wrapping a little bit to get the head built. My hackle plier, my whip finish tool is, John, what'd you do with my whip finish tool?
I hit it because I wanted to make sure you had the same experience I did.
There it is. And that's what I hate about GSP is sometimes you can't cut it. And then it, I don't know if you can see the inside of that bobbin tube. That brown comes off as a waxy substance all on the inside of that tube. So I'm not very happy with it. That was UTC GSP thread. And I'll never get it
Amy
again.
Milne had a problem with it too, Mike. She doesn't like it very much either.
So I'm going to take some of Al's new UV resin. Put a little dab on there. And that's the first one. I will be using this tomorrow morning. Not tomorrow morning, Saturday morning.
So you think that's a good crappie fly?
I'm going to give it a shot.
Okay.
One thing with UV is make sure you didn't clog that eye, because that'll make you sad when you're trying to tie your tippet in there. So there's the Matuka.
Do you
Any
wrap
questions?
do you wrap the feather in the same direction as the chenille?
Yes. The chenille isn't going anywhere. You said the rib, right? Is that what you're talking about?
The feather and the chenille in the same direction.
You were cutting out. Say it one more time.
The Matuka and the chenille go in the same direction.
So I just wrap the chenille in the normal over the top underneath. And then when I place the feathers on there, then the rib goes in that same direction. If that's what you're asking.
That's what I'm asking.
Okay.
I may have to try that with some partridge feathers.
Partridge, There's some like I never tried it with Schlappen. They have more webby barbules
Yeah,
and a little bit wider at the tips.
there was a bunch of schlaffen in that, that the stuff that NGAF gave to or donated to Healing Waters. And
Right.
I mean, a bunch, more than just a bunch.
I think there was some salt water. Another thing that I was thinking would be chartreuse color.
Yeah,
That's always good in stained water, which we have a lot around here.
yeah.
I think that would be an excellent color combination.
Just as an aside, Mike, I might want to pass on to Nebraska Fish and Game. We were managed to disperse 2 of those totes out to folks in the at the casting competition, and they were very appreciative of all that stuff.
Oh, really?
Yeah,
That's excellent.
they were amazed at the quantity and the quality of the tying materials, and some of those guys had never seen a full chicken skin before, so it was kind of fun.
That's good. I'm glad it went to some use because, the more some of that stuff sits around,
Yeah,
it can deteriorate. So,
I'll get with Charles sometime in the next couple of weeks, and we're going to split it down again and send half of it to Lincoln. So,
okay. This is the olive version of that thread. Again, I use it whenever I can, so then I'll use it up someday. Now we're going to do the perch version. So again, I'll start that oval tinsel on the back side. I don't want it to wrap around too much because that first turn, you want to make sure you don't twist that feather tip. Go about right there. Set that out of the way. And now we'll use start with the olive chenille. And you see how when it's carded, it gets kind of flat like that. If you steam it, that'll get really back to kind of the original fluffy look of it. Strip out those hairs. And just want to spin the other way. So I'm going to spin it counterclockwise as if I was looking down on it. And then it rolls back like that to capture the core there. And then it doesn't have to be fancy. I'll just roll it up here toward the front. But I'm going to need an orange section. So I'm going to go to about right. When you use dubbing for a body, it's kind of hard to make it as full as what this chenille does. I like the looks better of the chenille to make it a fatter body. Then the orange, there you are. Do the same thing and strip that fibers out of there. There we go. There's the body. Then I have pre-selected a couple feathers to use for the Matuka style wing, and then another one to use for the soft hackle. And like John was saying, with that green background, this doesn't look very green, but it's an olive, like an olive grizzly feather. Get those lined up pretty good. And then I'm going to want it right about there for the body. And then I'll strip the rest of this off. I'm going to do it over my bin if you don't mind. And that's going to lay right about there. And the front will be right in here. So try not to let it twist. I'm going to tie that down several wraps just to keep it in place. And then I can do my wrapping. So it's going to come up about right there. Then right there. These were invented for lakes. I think with the shape of them and the shape of that wing, I think you're going to be able to get more action out of them in a lake. I think if the water's moving, I don't know, I guess they'd work in a stream. I've only ever used them in lakes. The perch one I first tied for Minnesota, because of course there's a lot of perch up there. But when I was thinking of demoing some flies that are kind of timely for the season, I thought of wanting to try this spring. Like I said, those lakes that have the smallmouth and perch in them. So I'm bulking that head up a little bit, but I think I'll be able to do the hackle without too much trouble. I'm going to go back a little bit further. And then tie in the hackle by the tip again. That should be enough. About 3 to 4 turns. Seems to be a pretty good sweet spot there. Stroke everything back and then shape a head there. And if you come back toward the back here and just do a little bit softer wraps, you can kind of make those hackles want to lean back without flaring them out too bad. Get rid of that guy. It's going to cause me problems. And there's the perch Matuka. This stuff sets up so nice. That's completely dry and hard and no residue. I really like that stuff.
Nice fly.
That tail's twisted a little bit. Not really. Looked like it before. But I think that'd be great for bass as well. Just those, sorry, those fire tiger colors.
Yeah.
Orange, olive, and the stripes like that. A little bit of gold in it. I bet that'd be fantastic for bass. So
Love it.
I'm gonna take some of those, take with me out to Ogallala when I go for the bonefish tournament, because there's some good smallmouth fishing out there.
I'll make sure you get some.
So what's, I know you had 2 to 8 sizes, 2 to 8. What were you tying today on these hooks?
These right here are size 4, and they're
Yeah.
4XL hooks.
Okay.
And that's, again, the key is the feather that you select. So if let me switch back here. If I'm selecting one of these feathers, I want to use, say this one right here. This actually fell out of there. If I want to use that, I'll find another one that looks, mirrors it pretty well.
Mhm.
And then just kind of look at, if I spread that out on a size 4 hook, if I do a shank length, I'm going to end up with hardly anything left, and I won't be able to do the the kind of the mohawk along the top. So sometimes the feather size will just determine how big you want to do it. If you want to definitely want to do, say, some size 8 or some size 6 Matukas, you would just even get down into, a hen neck is always better because they're webbier and they'll give a better profile. But, if you can get a cheaper dry fly neck and you can get down into some of these, you could tie some, even some 10s and 12s out of some of these hackles like that. And they'd be a little skinnier profile. With a hen neck, it would be easier to come up with a like a wider profile. I kind of prefer this, and if you imagine when it gets wet, it's probably going to shrink down quite a bit in size like that. But those two are my favorite, this one and that perch.
What have you caught out of, Mike?
I used these in Lakota Reservoir right by the big heads in the Black Hills. And it has bass and rainbows in there. Mostly caught bass on them, honestly. But I mean, with any streamer, if you're taking those through any holes where you've got some bigger trout, I mean, they're going to see those, as especially that spruce. I would definitely use that for trout.
So you're just fishing like a streamer then, just a normal ordinary
Yep.
streamer. Okay.
Yep. Down and across a little bit and let it swing, or if you want to get annoyed, fish them upstream. It's kind of hard to keep your line under control. And but if you've got a nice slow flow, that's where I really liked it upstream, is any streamer, not necessarily this one, but if it's a nice slow flow and pretty straight and there's not a bunch of cross currents to throw them upstream, it's a lot longer of a drift, and you're just kind of letting them go along with the current and keeping your line tight. You start getting complex currents and boulders and stuff like that, it's hard to fish upstream. But again, the fish are facing upstream, so you can sneak up on them easier, and somebody who's clumsy is not going to chase them away as quick as.
Yeah, the problem I've had with fishing downstream is I tend to not be able to set the hook as well. I don't know why, but I've lost more fish fishing a downstream retrieve than I have an upstream retrieve, or an up and across.
I get the feeling that if I'm fishing downstream, I don't really do much of a hook set.
Yeah.
I mean, just kind of let the current set the hook. I do, of course, apply pressure, so it's kind of a hook set, but it's not like if I was upstream, that's where I think I've probably lost more fish. Is upstream, you've got the current coming toward you, and if there's any speed at all, you got to make sure you really come back and set the hook.
Yeah. I may have had problems with the hooks I was using too. I used some fairly inexpensive barbless hooks, and they just didn't seem to have the penetration that I needed. So that might be.
I use cheap hooks all the time.
And a hook sharpener. Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, I had one of those, and I managed to misplace it. So I think that's going to be my next investment, is a new hook sharpener.
Yeah.
Especially with Tenkara, a 13-foot Tenkara rod, you don't have a whole lot of hook setting power with that thing.
One streamer that I kind of want to use more often, especially in lakes, is all fish love eating little bluegills, and they swim in clouds and everything, but as they start getting a little bigger, they spread out, and all fish love eating little did I say bluegills? I meant bullheads.
Yeah.
So I want to kind of experiment with some with a little bit darker of a top feather, and maybe like a orange or a yellow, even a cream color, either dubbing or chenille.
Mhm.
Yeah, chenille.
Matuka style?
Yeah. I
Yeah.
mean, I like it for casting. A lot of flies, a lot of streamers end up kind of wind resistance, and you end up with problems if it's windy when you're casting them. But with these, they're so flat. They have a wide profile from the side, but when you're casting them, there's no resistance at all.
Okay.
They cast like you're casting a small nymph or a dry fly.
Cool. Yeah, I'm gonna have to tie some up and try them out at Prairie Queen.
Yeah,
But they'd be fun off the kayak, huh?
probably be careful on a kayak. Did you hear about weir span today or yesterday?
Yeah, I did.
Yeah.
I did. I'm not one of those dumb people though. I've got a life jacket that I wear religiously.
I'm surprised that the water temps are supposed to be around 50, but they were kind of thinking about hypothermia. I don't
Yeah.
know if I
Can't believe anybody was out in a boat without a damn life jacket. I mean, that's
Well, it's
just
kind of windy. I was wondering first when I heard about the kayak, I was wondering how he went down. It happens, but not that often.
yeah.
And then I heard there was a kayak, and then I think the other guy might have been a canoe.
Yeah. Yeah, the guy in the canoe was not wearing a life jacket, and he I don't know what he did, but all you got to do is hang on to the darn boat. I mean, it's not that hard, but
Yeah, unless the boat gets kicked away from you.
yeah. So
Right.
Mike, I used to swim in Lake Erie, and the water from your shoulders to your neck could be 60, but down your toes when you're treading water, you get leg cramps because it's 40.
yeah.
So that's what you got to watch out.
Yep. I
I
saw
won't be out
today.
in my kayak. I'm not going to be out in my kayak for a while yet. I got to get a little bit warmer.
I saw something today about 120 rule. If you add the temperature of the water and the temperature of the air, if it's less than 120, then you probably better be wearing a protective suit.
Yeah.
uh,
I've heard
to
that
protect
too.
you from hypothermia.
Yeah.
But